So happy New Year, and hopefully you're all having a very good start to the year. It's very busy for myself, as you can imagine, lots of people getting into their nutrition in the new year and starting with fresh habits. So wondering if any of you have started any new health habits this year in 2025. I'd love to hear, maybe put it in the chat and we can see any goals you've got for the year to do with your health and wellness and nutrition. And also ask any questions as you go or as I go along. Feel free to pop them in the chat box. Also, I'll give you the opportunity to ask them at the end. So we'll probably be going for maybe 40 minutes or so, allowing maybe 20 minutes or so for questions. So myself, I'm just gonna give you a quick introduction. I know a lot of you probably met me or before, and you will be aware of my background. But for those of you who haven't met before, my name's Rebecca Taylor, and I have I'm coming up to about 10 years of experience as a nutritionist, and I've got my undergraduate and graduate and postgraduate degrees in nutrition, and I particularly decided to specialize in personalized nutrition, looking at people's DNA and what that means for their nutritional needs. That's particularly my area of specialty, although I have broadened this out to other areas of nutrition since this, particularly looking at people's gut health, blood biomarkers, and really looking at that precision nutrition. But a lot of the time, I am focusing on the foundations of nutrition, which we'll be going through a little bit more today, and talking a bit more about nutrition as a wider concept globally as well. So most of my work is as a consultant nutritionist. I help companies create new formulations for products, and I work as an advisory as well for a few companies, and also see my own clients as well, and do some guest lecturing as well. Just about to guest lecture for my old university as well next week, which I'm very looking forward to. So let's dive into the subject today of sustainable nutrition. Nutrition for sustainable health and wellness. So really, we're talking about how nutrition impacts us on a physical level, on our mental well-being, and as the planet, because obviously we all need to eat. Food is a very universal thing, and it affects all of us. We all have a relationship to food, and our numbers, obviously, in the population are increasing massively. So our demands on the planet are increasing as well, and we only have finite resources. So this is becoming a more pressing issue to deal with. And yeah, we're going to talk about all these different aspects and how they all come together, and how all these kind of World Health Organization and all these big organizations globally are dealing with this as a big issue, really. So sustainable nutrition really is about balance. It's supporting our health whilst also reducing our environmental impact. So particularly topical at the moment, obviously, is the environmental impact, and all the policies coming out with the agendas for reducing our environmental impact and the different goals and targets they're setting. That's a big concern at the moment for a lot of organizations. So, I mean, I'll be talking a lot about our physical health as well, how our nutrition, what sustainable nutrition means for us, and actually what it means for for the planet. So let's go into what we're going to cover today. What's the foundations of sustainable nutrition, what it means, and why it's so important, and health benefits of sustainable eating, how it supports our body and our mind, and the environmental impact of our food choices, importantly, how our food choices impact the planet, and also practical tips. So particularly for you guys as students, what are some strategies you can implement for sustainable eating for you and your families? So again, to cover, what is sustainable nutrition? It's a diet that supports our health whilst also being environmentally responsible. It's particularly focusing on a plant-based diet or plant-based foods. So I think over the last 10 years, this plant-based diet has become very popular, but people think it almost means that you're vegan, but I think there's been a confusion here where people say they're plant-based and people think that that means you don't have any animal products in your diet, which isn't true. So plant-based just means that the majority of your calories are coming from plant-based foods and fruit, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, but you will have some dairy and meat products as well. And balancing our consumption of animal products. So in a similar vein, you're making sure that's not our majority of our calories aren't coming from animal products is really a key part of sustainable nutrition. And reducing our processed foods. So consuming less packaged foods, all these kind of artificial ingredients, because a lot of the time they take a lot of energy to produce these packaged foods, and they've traveled a lot of miles as well. So a bit on the global aspect. As our global temperatures rise and climate-related events are increasing, there is, of course, mounting pressure to build more sustainable and resilient food systems for the world.
Rebecca Taylor, can I just
Yes,
bring in one idea here?
of
I
course.
think I think just when you're talking about sustainable food, you're talking about sustainability for the earth, but you're also talking about food security for the future, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I think food security is one of those terms I want to bring into this because I don't think, have you said it yet?
Yeah, no, I haven't. Yes, no, good point. Yeah. So feel free to expand on that before I go ahead.
Yeah, just can you explain what food security for the future is?
Yeah, so it's ensuring that we're eating today in a way that our future generations will also be provided for. You know, we're protecting our resources for the world so that they also, yeah, will be able to have a whole diet that provides them everything they need, and yeah, we can sustain those practices of food production. Would you say, I don't know if you have anything to add on to that, Dr. Lambert?
Oh, just I think it's the proper use of it goes it gets away from nutrition and the proper use of the land.
Yes.
But I think when you come down to like eat less food from animals because
Mm,
animals use up more water, they use up more land. It's like how much grain can you produce on a piece of land as opposed to how much meat you can produce there, right?
exactly. Well, yeah, we have some stats for that in a second. Yeah. So feel free to interject at any point, Dr. Nam, because I'd love to hear your input as well. But the problem really is with the world that we're facing is that we have overnutrition and we have undernutrition simultaneously going on. So we've got people dealing with nutrient deficiencies in their actually calories that they're getting in, but also people who are consuming far too many calories. And we've got this imbalance around the world, as I'm sure you all know about. I don't need to tell you. And of course, we have the need to preserve our very limited natural resources in the world. So this is no small issue that we're dealing with. And the chronic disease rates, of course, are going up and up and up. They're called NCDs, non-communicable diseases. And these are those chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, all of these which aren't communicated, through viruses, for example, but actually are to do with our lifestyle and diet. So really a key aspect as well of sustainable nutrition is we need to make sure that it's culturally appropriate as well. We can't be cutting out foods or having policies coming in cutting out foods, or potentially animal products, for example, which actually that's been in that culture for a long time and it's not culturally appropriate to do so. So that we're a challenge is to make sure it's supporting all types of people based on their race, education, background, gender, um, and their access to food as well. Of course, everyone has different access to food. So some people simply need to, well, they can't get to a supermarket unless they get a bus, or it might take hours to get them there. So whereas other people have that on their doorstep. So there's major inequalities with our just simply with our access to food. And as you can see, the greenhouse gas emissions that are produced from all of our global food systems, so everything that's produced, contributes 21 to 37% of all the greenhouse gases. So that's including all transportation, all the kind of production, any kind of greenhouse gas. That's, I mean, that's pretty significant if you think that's nearly 4/10 of the total emissions there. But we see that a plant-based diet, I'm not exactly sure on how they classify the plant-based diet and the calories of that are coming from fruits and veg versus animal products. I'm not quite sure on this statistic, but they've said that it could reduce those greenhouse gas emissions by up to 70%. So we can't ignore that very significant statistic there, or prediction. Now, I don't know about you, but food waste is something I'm very, very against, and I do my absolute best to be careful about this. I think sometimes it depends on the way that you've been brought up. I know my mum was very against having any food waste. We always had chickens and they would eat up the scraps, or would even put like the ends of vegetables, put those into a soup kind of cauldron and make vegetable broth from it, for example, or chicken bones, and making chicken broth from that, and making sure nothing was ever left over. And I think that has been instilled in me, thankfully. And I'm glad to say that I don't think that I waste as much as the average Brit. I think in the UK, we're one of the worst countries for food waste. I think on average, people waste, I just read a statistic, it's about £500, just under £500 a year on food waste. So in dollars, I'm trying to convert that, but maybe $800, something like that. But our food waste not only impacts our budget, but it also impacts the global health greenhouse emissions as well. So could reduce those in total by up to 10%. It's pretty significant as well. And of course, a lot of this is going to be food waste from supermarkets and restaurants, and it's going to be outside of our control. But I would like to see more policy put in place for those institutions, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I see in the supermarket how much is wasted and thrown away, and it really, really upsets me. I know some supermarkets are changing. I don't know about where you all are, and maybe in the States. I'm not sure if that's I'd be interested to know if any of you are aware of any initiatives to stop that happening. But it's slow.
Years ago, I used to work in a mission to where I would go out to the grocery stores, pick up their food waste and take it to a food bank. And then people
Brilliant.
who were traveling through, who didn't have jobs, people who didn't have homes, we would have bags of food for them just to take and eat.
That's excellent. Yeah, we have similar here for food banks as well, but they're so strict on their food safety. They really don't want to come under any scrutiny of people saying that they've got a food poisoning or anything. So they kind of are more worried about that. So that's why they throw away food. As far as I'm aware, that's the problem, unfortunately. So yeah, that's really why ideally you want to go for local produce as much as you can. Well, part of the reason, well, firstly, they're not going to have as much waste. And importantly, they're also the farm to fork mileage is going to be a lot less. So farm to fork is that kind of emissions or carbon footprint that's calculated for, say, for a tomato, how many miles has it travelled to get from your plate from the farm. And obviously you want that to be as low as possible and small as possible. Sometimes not always possible, certainly in the UK, that we're not going to get all these exotic fruits, avocados. I'm just looking here. Definitely, we're going to struggle to grow those here. Although I do know avocados take a lot of water, unfortunately, to grow. So it's not always entirely possible to eat local produce, but if we can all try and eat seasonal if we can. And there is a lot of benefit to our health as well for this, because they're generally a lot more nutritious. So when fruit and veg are grown or harvested when they're in season, they actually hold a lot more nutrition. So you might notice that they're a lot more, the colors are a lot brighter, they taste better. That's because they haven't taken as long to get to you, and they've been picked at their ultimate perfect ripe time to be picked. So yeah, that's two things you can try and work towards, because overall they can have up to four times lower carbon emissions compared to imported or out of season foods. And I know a lot of foods are now imported out, so fresh fruit and veg can often be imported out of. I went to Fiji not long ago, and I could see a lot of the fresh produce was being taken out of the country, not leaving much left for those who actually live there, which was quite sad to see. But yeah, ultimately your food choices really hold a lot of power, even though there might not be much we can do at a policy level, at an individual level. These things really have a snowball effect. And yeah, so the benefits aren't just for the planet either, as I was just alluding to on the last slide. A plant-based diet, we know, massively impacts our health in positive ways. So heart disease is one of the biggest killers, and is the biggest killer for females, I believe. And that risk can be reduced by 30% by having a plant-based diet. And fiber, we know it's so important. I would have spoken about this on many different presentations about how important a fiber-rich diet is. But colorectal cancer is very much linked to a low fiber diet. So that's what you're going to get from a high fruit and veg diet, is naturally going to give you most of the fiber you need, if not all. So we try and get, in the UK, it's 30 grams that is the goal, but thinking in the US it's 25 grams. Not sure. So maybe 20, yeah, I think it's 25. And omega-3 rich foods. Okay, these omega-3 can be a little bit more tricky to get from a completely plant-based diet. So you can get it from nuts and seeds, but they isn't converted quite as well as omega-3 from oily fish itself. But if you can, to get most of your omega-3 from olive oil and nuts and seeds and avocados, things like that, that is great. And then having a few portions of oily fish a week is perfect. And omega-3, we know, reduces symptoms of depression because it's linked with inflammation, and yeah, can affect reductions in depression by up to 50%, which is very significant. Although I know a lot of people don't like oily fish, so that can be a bit of a struggle for some people to reach that goal. In which case I would recommend a omega-3 supplementation. You can get fish oil capsules not too expensively. And sadly, we know that food production is really a very leading cause of deforestation and biodiversity loss and soil and water pollution. And unfortunately, as the population increases, this is only becoming more of an issue. But by changing to a plant-based diet, this is how we're really going to move the needle on this. Our food system accounts for 70% of all human fresh water usage. See, some food requires more water and resources than others. So, for example, 1 kilogram of beef emits 60 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And that's just because of the cows that are needed to produce, and the methane that they produce as a byproduct. They are releasing CO2 into the atmosphere, whereas we just get 0.9, so less than 1/60th of the amount from production of lentils. So see, nutritionally we can't compare them like for like exactly. The steak is going to have a lot more iron and protein and other nutrients in there, but the lentils aren't going to give us quite as much. But it just to demonstrate here that meat generally does require a lot more land usage and water, and then the emissions as well are higher. So yeah, just to emphasize this point even more, is that livestock farming uses 83% of all our farmland around the world, but it only provides like a fifth of our calories that are needed for the world. So I think that's quite a good statistics, kind of give you the whole global picture, really. I'm interested to know maybe how many of you are vegetarian or plant-based. Maybe let me know in the comments. I'm personally vegetarian. I have been since I was 10. I had a real conviction one day that I couldn't say that I loved animals and eat them at the same time. So I have been vegetarian ever since, although after about 5 years, I became anemic and started eating meat for a few weeks and felt a lot better, but then just I couldn't carry on. So I just made sure my vegetarian diet, I worked really hard to make sure I had everything I needed in that. And that's kind of what got me into nutrition in the first place, because I couldn't believe how much more energy I had from really focusing on getting more iron in my diet and B12, which are the ones I was particularly deficient in my diet before, focusing really on lots of beans and lentils and yeah, and not just having plain pasta and all these kind of carbohydrates all the time, which is, I have to say, what I ate a lot. Anyway, sidetrack off that. In the UK, we have something called the Eat Well Guide, and I don't necessarily follow it completely. I think it's a good base and a good guideline. I don't think it covers everything, but yeah, it's a good standardized way for studies to kind of use a basis for what a healthy diet should look like. So I'm not against it for that. And yeah, a bit like BMI, I don't think it's the best reading for someone's health status, but also I realize that at a high level, we need to know what's a good way to measure someone in an easy way that we can use like across the board for studies. So yeah, whatever it is you have in your country, it's probably fairly similar to this. They've got the food pyramid, I think it's in the US. And yeah, I mean, this study found that if everyone in the UK ate like they did in the Eat Well Guide, we would reduce our environmental impact of our diets by a third on average, quite significant. And we'd also reduce the number of new cases of heart disease, stroke, cancer, and type 2 diabetes in the UK. So it is a win-win. But unfortunately, we can know all this on paper, but actually the behavior change is always the difficult bit. So people can know something's good for them and good for the environment, but whether they'll actually make that change is a whole nother question in itself. And that's where we need to get some really compelling strategies in place. Policies, I think, really need to, or government agencies like World Health Organization, they really need to get some very compelling kind of advertisement almost out there, I think, for people to make the switch, or at least even just having one plant-based day a week could be a great start, or even one meat-free meal on I don't know, one evening a week would be a good start. And oh, I think someone's typed something on the presentation. But don't worry, I don't think I can get rid of that. So the only problem is with reducing or telling people to go plant-based, it can have other unintended negative impacts on human health, which overall can worsen all these health inequalities and contribute to undernutrition, and even, especially in children potentially, which can have consequences for their whole life potentially. So we do need to be careful about it's sort of finding the balance here, because we do want people to eat less meat, but that's probably mostly in the developed countries. In developing countries, I don't think that's necessarily the best idea, this is just from kind of my personal perspective here, is that really the animal protein is a very rich source of nutrition and calories and protein, which can be difficult for some people in those undeveloped countries to actually get hold of. So, and it's part of their cultural diet as well. So, I think certainly here in the UK and the US, there's too much, there's overconsumption definitely of animal protein. But yeah, kind of having a broad sweeping statement of we need to all go plant-based, I think is not culturally not taking into account, the whole picture really. And things like we have there's a milk, I forget what it's called, but initiative to bring milk into schools. And this has been really successful. I think it's about 160 million children get hold of milk at school. And this provides them with lots of protein, calcium, vitamin D, A, and all these other nutrients as well. So it's not necessary that we're labeling any food as good or bad. I think every food does have a place in the diet, but when we're looking at a global scale, and we're looking at the consumption of these animal products and ultra processed foods here in the UK, for example, we know that it's too high. And the UK, we're not very good at, like I mentioned earlier, with the food waste. We're throwing away 6.6 million tons of food each year. And 70% of that is still edible. And that's really sad. Apparently, bread is the most thrown away food, which is a shame because you can easily throw away bread. Sorry, throw away. You can easily freeze bread. So that's super easy one to make sure you don't waste. And that even provides a health benefit as well. So when you freeze bread and then reheat it or put it into the toaster, it actually provides a source of resistant starch for our gut, which is really, really great for us. And our gut bacteria absolutely love it. And the World Health Organization, they submitted a document called Sustainable Healthy Diets Guiding Principles. And there's a few things that I just wanted to highlight from it, that one of their first areas of recommendation was actually breastfeeding. So starting with really day one for helping sustainable nutrition in someone's, basically starts with actually breastfeeding rather than formula feeding. Obviously, because there's no production that's had to gone into that, unlike formula milk, which has to go through a production process. Actually, the most sustainable thing to do is to breastfeed, and definitely, the healthiest for the child as well. And we definitely need to, like I spoke before, reduce ultra processed foods. And you can think of an ultra processed food as something which you wouldn't be able to make in your own kitchen, whereas a processed food might be something which you could recreate in your kitchen. So anything that's canned or packaged up in a cardboard box is likely to be ultra processed. It doesn't always mean it's really bad, and sometimes it's a good thing. It's needed to preserve the food. But yes, the ultra ones that we want to avoid. So by reducing ultra processed foods, we're reducing non-communicable diseases. And also, they said in their report that it will also reduce foodborne illness. So it's going to help any kind of cost of healthcare, and by focusing on a plant-based diet, it's obviously going to be just less chance of foodborne illness as well from that. And then supporting communities, of course, is more of a higher level thing that we can't do as individuals, but working on different food schemes and education of cooking classes in schools and communities. It's all really, really key. So Yeah, just gonna say the problem is there's no problem with all of this really is that there's no one size fits all solution to such a complex problem. And yeah, how do we tackle such a big issue? And honestly, I don't have the answers. And it's to create policies that are suitable for all these different cultures we have around the world, and that's fair, that these changes are fair and achievable for everyone, and especially those on low incomes. Is that something we can achieve? I don't think it's going to be a global one size fits all solution. It's definitely going to have to be on a individual country by country basis. But I'm not saying anything too groundbreaking there. So thinking about some things that you can do as an individual, because that's where we have the power, right? That's where we should focus our attention, is actually what we can do. And also it's going to help your health, which I'm sure you all want to do anyway. So it's a win-win. So we know that cooking at home obviously is going to be a better option in terms of our health and our wallets. So I don't have to tell you that it's going to be a lot cheaper to make something from home than it is to get a takeaway, but it's also going to have less of those rubbish ingredients you don't want in there as well. Things that make it taste good, and it's going to make you want to come back for more, and it's going to make you make the food taste a bit addictive. So yeah, you kind of want to avoid those additives, MSG and things, which we often find in takeaways, so that we don't yeah, keep going back for more essentially, and then batch cooking. So as you know, batch cooking will save you money, and it'll take you more time in the upfront, but it will save you time in the long run. And also it's going to reduce packaging waste as well. I don't know about you, but I always hate seeing how much packaging is wasted with all these ready cooked meals that I buy. I sometimes buy, sometimes. I'm not perfect, even though I'm a nutritionist. And then canned as well. I mean, again, wasting resources by buying canned lentils. I think it's one of those where you have to be a bit prepped. You can't just kind of with dried lentils, you can't just eat them straight away. They need to be pre-soaked, and that can take quite a few hours in a slow cooker. But it will cost you potentially 5 times less. So it is worth it. You just have to have a little pre-planning there. And this is one of my favorite tips for packing in a nutritional punch with food, where you kind of get almost like a supplement, almost like a whole multivitamin in natural form here by growing your own sprouts. So you can get loads of different sprouting seeds. Mung beans are probably my favorite. You get broccoli sprouts, and you grow them in these jars, and you get a sprouting lid, and it's really cheap and easy and a great way to get nutrition in. And I don't know about you, but in the UK we have these things called odd box, where all these rejected fruit and veg go into these boxes and get delivered to you. And I really like it, because otherwise these foods would simply go into food waste. But yeah, it's a great one. I don't know how much cheaper they really are, to be honest with you. But yeah, I haven't bought them before, but I do like the idea of them. And like I said, I kind of call them the butts, like the vegetable butts. You like use the ends and put them in, keep them in a plastic Ziploc bag, put them in the freezer, add to it when you're chopping your fruit and veg, and then, or not fruit, probably just veg. And then once you've got your bag full, put it in with some boiling water, and you can make yourself a nice pot of vegetable broth. So just little things like this. And then, like I said, shopping seasonal and local. Again, this can be more costly. So I totally appreciate this, that it's not accessible for everyone. But if you can, and organic probably might have had less miles than non-organic. So if you can stretch that, and look at the Dirty Dozen list that the WHO release every year, and there it will show you the most heavily sprayed fruits and veg for that last year. So it's updated regularly. So it's a really great thing to look at. If you are thinking about going organic for some things, that's a good one to make sure you're prioritizing sort of the worst offenders. And interestingly, I've just added in mindful eating here because a lot of us rush through our days, right? And we're rushing eating and we're working at the same time, we're on our computer. And this is not great for a few reasons because it's going to probably cause us to overeat on calories. And because our mind is not focused on the food we're eating and hasn't really taken a score of what we've eaten. It's just kind of, you're looking at the screen, but you're eating at the same time. So your brain hasn't connected really. And also, it's not great for our digestion. So I work with a lot of people who have digestive issues, and as one of the first things I get them to do is to make sure they eat their food without distractions. And yeah, it's shown that those who eat less distracted, eat when they're not so distracted, actually might not consume about 25% less calories. So something you can try, worth a shot. Also, maybe drinking a glass of water before your meal can just help with maybe making you not feel quite so hungry. Although, on the other hand, it can dilute your digestive juices, so you just have to see if that works for you. If you get any digestive issues, I would leave water aside. But yeah, that's one little tip for you. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, everyone.